I'd like to ask, should Jess Phillips resign from being the safeguarding minister? It seems some of the victims of the grooming don't have confidence in her, and one of them's actually called for her to resign. So should she resign?
3 survivors of the grooming gang scandal have resigned from the Survivors Liaison Panel, which was set up to work alongside the National Inquiry into grooming gangs, while one of the people reported to be a contender to become the chairman of the inquiry has withdrawn from the process, citing media scrutiny of her. I mean, this is, I think, incredible, where people who've been through this horrendous experience, they felt let down by the police, let down by local councils, let down by the judicial system, and now let down by politicians. Well, I mean, should Jess Phillips resign, Gemma?
Oh, I don't know. I totally agree with what you've just said. At the heart of this, these girls, honestly, what they've been through, and the fact that it hasn't been handled with absolute kid gloves, to lead to this, where it looks like it's going to collapse. I know Labour weren't really massively sort of full sort of chested about wanting to do it in the first place. But I know that Jess Phillips, her record prior to like this, I know how much work she's done in terms of protecting women and domestic abuse. And throughout COVID, I know she was working tirelessly.
She wasn't. It was all posturing. It was all about her. It was publicity. That's what it is with Jess Phillips. 20
years of working with in refuges she has got quite a background.
She's got a background, but it's all about the Jess Phillips show. I mean, you just look at this issue here. She made such a lot of noise about some of these things when she's in opposition, but she's been completely unable. She had to be dragged kicking and screaming. Her and the rest of the Home Office ministers, including the Home Secretary at the time, had to be dragged to do this. They wanted to shove it under the carpet. Why? Because it was all their Labour council colleagues who were the ones that had turned a blind eye, and they feared upsetting all of those people who ran all those councils.
Did you not seek to take
Rotherham and all those other councils? It was all the Labour councils who hid it, who covered it up for years, and they were too frightened to take it on. Had it not been for the Conservatives making the running on this, Jess Phillips would be doing nothing, believe me.
All right, Calvin.
I find that despicable from someone that used this as a political football. I believe you sent an email out saying we've won when we... As though this was something to be proud of.
Yeah, one on behalf of getting justice for women who've been abused systematically.
Jess Phillips has an incredible background in this field. I can talk you through many cases that she has taken me and my constituents through to make sure that they're into a safe space. And I spoke to her in the corridors about this evening. And part of the reason why this is so difficult, and part of the reason that that we are seeing upset, is there is such a multiplicity of victims here, and that's who we should be concentrating on. Is the fact that these people have suffered horrendously, and the discussion invariably is about the men, and actually not about the people that were victims. And we are maybe a year into trying to bring about bring this process about. I think it took.
But you didn't want it. I mean, the point is the
government did it. It wasn't that we didn't want it. We were waiting for Baroness Casey to find.
No, that's simply not the case. The government made clear it did not want a national inquiry. Jess Phillips herself said it should all be about local inquiries.
Well, let's look how we've acted. We've got 1,200 cases that have been open. I think we had 7 men prosecuted in the last couple of days. So we'll be judged on our actions, and our actions are that there is 1,200 cases open.
So why did you not want a national inquiry in the first place?
We waited. I mean, you've had my answer. We waited for Baroness Casey for the experts to tell us how this should be dealt with, because the part of the thing with this is, and part of the reason why there's upset, is that these things are very sensitive, and the interactions that have been happening are in order to protect victims. And so
the victims seem to be blaming Jess Phillips
because of the interaction. So part of the discussions have been about ensuring that each of the that people don't encroach on the experiences of other people's. And at the moment, we haven't set and defined anything about the parameters of this case, but it will be victims.
But you've got also the putative chair of the inquiry also withdrawing from the process. So it's not just the victims. It's
the chair of inquiry. If go back and read your own notes, the chair is withdrawn because of undue scrutiny, and that is why this is so difficult, and that is why we are going to go about it in an appropriate.
But it's a shambles, isn't it?
It's a shambles.
Well, it's not. It's a year in. How long did it take you to set up? How long was the COVID inquiry?
You're in government now.
How long was the COVID
government now. It's your responsibility. You can't blame us. You are in government now.
And that's why we've got 1,200 people, 1,200 cases out.
So I first came across these child rape gangs, which is what we should call them. I don't know why we're calling them grooming gangs. Why should we be so euphemistic about it? And I'll never forget this, a series of conversations I had with the late, great Anne Cryer, Labour MP for Keighley, when I was a young political correspondent back in the late 90s. And she was literally in tears, her head in her hands, because her own party leadership wouldn't take this seriously. I agree with you. Both, the main parties that have been in power have washed their hands of this because of political correctness, fears, particularly in Labour's case, upsetting the Muslim vote upon which you depend very, very heavily in certain parts of the country. So these are the realities. If Elon Musk hadn't have got hold of this issue, I doubt we'd be in the position that we actually are. That's the reality. And I do think the Labour Party, well, it's on the record, it's in the papers, did try to suppress a national inquiry.
I don't think we didn't try to, but that's not wrong.
Can I just finish? Can I just finish? You make it sound less credible if you don't let people argue against you. Thank you. A lot of the reason Labour tried to suppress it was because the current leader was Director of Public Prosecutions when a lot of these things happened, and a lot of it happened in Labour constituencies. And in those constituencies, the Muslim vote is larger than your majority. These are the realities. Unless we get hold of this as a political class very, very quickly, the slither of credibility that our political and media class has over this, largely because of a few brave individuals like the late Times journalist Andrew Norfolk and others, let's hand it. You know my relationship with GB News, Ian. Hand it to GB News. Charlie Peters on GB News has done some incredible work getting this over the political line and making politicians have to face this.
Some of us on this station were talking about this as far back as 2011, 2012,
absolutely,
when a lot of the media did not want to talk about it.
Absolutely, you were as
Gemma,
well.
I think you got slightly cut off in your first answer. Do you want to come back and say anything?
It's fine. It was interesting. I was listening. I don't think I've got anything more to say on this. I was just sort of feeling a bit depressed because it's sort of, I don't want to conflate the two things. And yet I was thinking on the train about this case and about... Then you've got Prince Andrew, and just time and time again, victims, their voices just fade away. And it's so incredibly sad. I know it's sort of two ends of a very different scale, but it isn't. What Epstein did was the same as these vile men. So